Hi. Good, how are you? Good. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me have your attention, please. All quiet, please. Go ahead, open up your notes to the section where we were at. We're going to continue looking at Article 1, Section 5, organizational details, including the punishing of behavior and expulsions of potential of members of the House and Senate. Quick update. Some of you guys are aware of this. The House of Representatives voted yesterday on the article. There was just one article of impeachment. And, I mean, it was very, very fast. It was done very, very quickly. And, of course, that upset some people, although other people are like, yeah, I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on what the evidence and the issues are being presented. Okay? So the article had to do with Trump's role predominantly with the attack on the Capitol that occurred last week. Result of the vote, impeachment. Anybody not know how the vote turned out? Do you know how it turned out, Morgan? You don't know how it turned out? Well, let me ask you this. In the House, for an impeachment to be passed, what is required? Yep, a majority vote. Right, simple majority. And was there a majority? Yes, so add that to your notes, actually. Donald Trump impeached in 2020 and now impeached in 2021. He's the only president in our country's history that's been impeached twice. Now, of course, the next thing is the Senate part. Now, of course, this is very interesting because it's going on to the Senate, but the Senate is in recess right now. Recess basically means they're outside playing in the field. Just kidding. But I mean, it's kind of like that. So they're not officially in there. The person who's the majority leader right now in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, who will not be the majority leader after the Democrats get Kamala Harris as vice president and then she breaks the tie, he said, we're going to be out of, we're not coming back in until the 19th, and then the next day is the inauguration. So, here you go. There will be, it doesn't look like there's going to be any impeachment trial in the Senate before Trump's term ends. Okay? So, will there be a trial after that? Well, you get a lot of different people with different opinions as far as like the legality of having an impeachment trial in the Senate after somebody's already left office. Some of them say, well, the only thing you can really do to them is kick him out of office, right? Well, if Trump's already out of office, then he's out of office. But others say, oh, no, there's still more that is at stake. So, for example, what more could be at stake is if he were to be convicted in the Senate, he's already out of the job, but he could lose federal benefits, retirement, and, critically, an opportunity to run for federal office, including the presidency again. So that's why that's still kind of going around. Here's the reality. Okay, JT, what is the vote requirement in the Senate to have a conviction after the House has already done an impeachment? 2/3, right. And that would require, under the new configuration of the Senate, I mean, if all 50 senators from the Democrats voted to convict, how many, Ava, how many, what? Pay attention. What? 50, it's a math problem. So we need 2/3 of the vote in order to get a conviction in the Senate, and you got 50 Democrats. How many Republicans would need to go along with that? It's easy math. It's easy math. It's simple addition. What's the lowest number out of 100 that you can get 2/3? Do you want to call on somebody that thinks they know? So, yeah, 17 is the ultimate answer. So 67 out of 100. So, I'm going to come back to you, Ava. If there's 17 Republicans and 50 Democrats, what does that add up to? 50 plus 17 equals? Very good. So, the question is, and there's some doubt as to whether or not there would be enough Republican votes in the Senate. How many Republicans in the House yesterday voted to impeach? 10. Yeah, there were 10. Okay? There were 10. Most of the other ones, like, for example, the 2 Republican representatives from Idaho and Trey, who were the 2 Republican representatives from Idaho? They're in your notes.
Jim Risch.
Nope, that's Senate. So this would be a little bit earlier in your notes. Do you think you remember? No, Mike Crapo is one of the senators. Did you say Mike Crapo? Nope, nope. He's one of the senators.
I know those guys, but I don't remember. I know what they look like. Not that guy.
No. You have to go back a ways.
Yeah, them.
These two. Mike Simpson for the 2nd Congressional District. That's the same district my dad represented way back when. And then Russ Fulcher. They both voted against impeachment yesterday. I want to say Mike Simpson, one of his reasons was they're moving too fast, right? We normally it'll go to like a whole committee, they'll do an investigation and so forth. And of course the people voting in favor of it were like, yeah, we know what we know, and so yeah, I feel comfortable doing that. Yeah.
Did anyone offer debate?
Apparently there was some debate, but it wasn't a lot. I mean, they got it done fairly quickly. I think the relevant issues were still pretty fresh in their minds, as in like last week. Yeah.
Wait, what are they? Idaho what?
Those two, Idaho's representatives to the House of Representatives. One from the 1st Congressional District, Russ Fulcher. Probably that's going to be your representative, because that's mostly like western Ada County. If you live in Boise, you probably got Mike Simpson. If you lived in Twin Falls, you definitely have Mike Simpson. If you live in Idaho Falls, you definitely have Mike Simpson. But Russ Fulcher is sort of like Meridian to the west and north. Okay? All right. Questions and comments, how things are going? Hopefully things will be pretty calm in Washington, D.C. There's like 20,000 United States military personnel, including among them 300 Idaho National Guard that have been sent there, all kinds of National Guard and so forth. They don't want to have a repeat of what happened last week at the inauguration. So they're going to make sure that everything's just like secure.
Can the president get, like, can they go to jail?
Yeah, that would be a totally separate thing. Okay?
Like, can he go to jail, like, after he gets out?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, depending on what the charges are. And we'll see that actually when we get to our next unit, which is going to be the court system and your civil rights. Yeah. I mean, if you're faced with federal criminal charges or state criminal charges and you are convicted, there's a potentiality of jail time. Now, on a federal one, we haven't got to this yet, but who do you suppose has the power, if someone is charged with a federal crime, to just go, huh, you may not be punished. You are pardoned. The guy with the big, actually, it's the president. We'll see. That's one of the presidential powers. And so there's some debate over, like, could Trump pardon himself for federal offenses? Could Trump pardon people who broke into the Capitol who are charged with federal offenses? Yeah, he could. I don't know. I mean, if he did, that would probably upset some people. But they could also be charged with state charges. Does the president have any authority to pardon, make it go away, people charged with state offenses? No. No, that's going to be up to the state governments and so forth. Yeah, so that's not an issue. All right, I want to keep moving on this. I'll take a couple more questions, but I want to keep moving on because we're going to get into the issue of like what the Senate and the House can do as far as punishing members within the House and the Senate for misbehavior. Yeah.
I saw like a little glimpse of it, but like I saw like President Trump was saying like he had nothing to do with the riot.
Yeah, I mean, basically his position is I was encouraging them to stand up for what's right and go to the Capitol. Can you go to the Capitol and protest there? Yes. Can you go to the Capitol and break in and do all kinds of damage and injure people and so forth? That would be a big no. So there's an important distinction because some of the folks that were really upset and voted for impeachment and so forth were like, Trump, you have been complaining that this has been an unfair, fraudulent election ever since the time of the election took place. And their response is, if that's the case, bring the evidence in the courts where the courts will sift through it all and so forth. And did he have the opportunity to do that? Yeah. Did the courts rule in his favor? No. Did the states certify their election results? Did they send them in? When were they opened up? On the 6th, on the day that they went there. So people are like, Trump, come on, dude. You're like giving this impression that the election ultimately is completely fraudulent and there's more that can be done. And this sense is like if you go up there and intimidate, right? And so that's the question, were Trump's words and actions and so forth meant to cause his supporters to intimidate and even break into the Capitol? Well, some people are like, ding, 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 ding. Answer is yes. Other people are like, no, it's free speech, and he didn't go quite that far. So, depending on who you talk to, you're going to get a different result. But that is the first time since the British, like during the War of 1812, remember that last year, during the War of 1812? Yeah, the British landed in the United States of America, got to the Capitol building, burned most of it down. So thankfully that didn't happen last week, but that's the first time you had that many people break into the Capitol building for like purposes that were not necessarily okay. We got to keep moving on.
Didn't the House minority leader say that it wasn't fraudulent?
Yeah, now they've said it's not fraudulent. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what he said now. So, yeah. I mean, I think now that things are starting to sort of settle down, you're not getting as many people that are like, oh, yeah, it's fraudulent. Now it's sort of like, we're done with this. Yeah. Yes, Trey?
What would happen if they did burn down the Capitol?
That would be bad.
But what do you think would happen?
I don't know. I mean, that's a hypothetical question. Then they would have to meet somewhere else. It would be a great tragedy. In fact, on 9/11, there was a suspicion that one of the planes, there were 4 planes that were hijacked. One of them, hold on, let me finish. One of the planes crashed into the Defense Department, the Pentagon. 2 of them crashed into the 2 Twin Towers in New York City. There was another one that was heading back to Washington, D.C., likely target either the White House or the Capitol building. But it was heading back toward Washington, D.C., and then passengers overcame the terrorists, although they weren't able to fly the plane, and the whole thing went crashing into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and everyone died. But, I mean, in a sense, those passengers were heroes because they prevented a massive loss of life of people who were living and working in the White House or working in the Capitol building. Okay? Anyway, yeah. So, let's get to this. Write this down. This is in Article 1, Section 5. And I want to go through this just to kind of recap. Who is in charge, Megan, of punishing senators who allegedly have done wrong things? I'll give you 2 choices, the House or the Senate. The Senate, exactly. So make sure you have that. The Senate's in charge of dealing with the discipline over the senators. And keep an eye on these issues, because these could be popping up as we go forward. Because there are some members of the House and Senate that are like, man, some of those senators and members of the House were doing some stuff, and that was just not okay, and we need to discipline them. Okay? What's kind of the lightest thing they could do? Raise your hand if you can tell me this. This was something you did. Yeah. Kind of a scolding. They call it censure. You can write this down. C-E-N-S-U-R-E, censure. It's like a scolding. It's like, shame on you. You shouldn't have done that, member of the House. Now that is a mark on the historical record of how you behaved. Okay, what's the biggest thing that they could do? Exactly, expulsion. They could vote to expel. Put this down. It requires a 2/3 vote. I don't think I mentioned that last time. It requires a 2/3 vote. So you basically need, if you're going to try and expel somebody from the other party, you're going to need all your people, plus you're going to need some people from that party. Okay? All right. And, it really has to rise to the level of like something really super, super serious. I mean, you're going to get all kinds of people going, shame on you, doing this, that, and so forth. But, I mean, how many people will get censured in the Congress? I don't know. There may be some from the House. There may be some from the Senate. How many of them are going to get kicked out? At this point, I'm predicting no one's going to get kicked out. Okay? But maybe their reputation is going to be so bad they're going to have a hard time running for re-election the next time. Who knows? A lot of things can happen between now and the next election. And by the way, when is the next election? Next federal election. 2022. What month? Very good. What day of the week? Oh, yeah, we did this last time. What day of the week? What day of the week? There's 7 days of the week. Tuesday, yeah, exactly, Tuesday. And so it'll be, remember the formula? You remember it? Frank knows it. Frank's like, I got this one down. What is it? Is it the first Tuesday of the month? First Tuesday after the first Monday. Yeah, so it could be the first Tuesday after the, but if the first Tuesday is November the 1st, the election will be held a week later. Okay? So that's going to be going on. Just a quick recap on this one. Senator David Vitter from Louisiana. You can write that down in your notes. Senator David Vitter. This was probably, I want to say about like, seems like ages ago. Like maybe 15 years ago or so forth. He was ultimately convicted on a felony charge out of the state of Louisiana having to do with prostitution. All right, so the members of the Senate were like, man, that is really bad. But the Republicans, and he was a Republican, the Republicans weren't too keen on having this guy kicked out of the Senate. Raise your hand if you can remember. What was the reason? Yeah. Yeah, what was, so if he had been kicked out, who would have put a new senator in? The governor of the state of Louisiana, who was, yeah, key point, a Democrat. And the laws of Louisiana were such that that Democratic governor could put a Democrat in to replace this Republican. And did the Republicans in the Senate want that? No, I mean, it was very, very close. They did not want to have, so they're like, they're going to censure this guy. You know, shame on you. Don't do that again. Do not go seek prostitutes. That's not okay. Right? But that was a felony. So the next one, I'll give you a couple of the facts here first. Okay, the next one was a misdemeanor. Okay, you write this down. This is Senator Craig from Idaho, and people don't talk about Idaho that much. We're kind of a small state, but for a while after this hit the news, Idaho was talked about. I mean, and actually for a while, most of the talk was like late night comedians and so forth telling jokes about Senator Craig. Here's what happened. The gist of it is this. Here's the gist of it. He was charged with violating the law in the state of Minnesota, a misdemeanor. He pled guilty. He thought that this, and I'll tell you the embarrassing details of the case and so forth in just a minute, but he thought that that would be kept quiet, because it's just like, we'll just kind of make it go away, right? I mean, know this. If you ever apply for a job, do you suppose that they might ask you for like information about any criminal proceedings? Yeah. Sure, yeah, that's a relevant issue. So can you keep that all like secret? No. I mean, if you lie about it and then they're like, I want to ask you about this thing on your record that we looked up. Oh, that, yeah. Anyway, so stuff like that matters. You want to try and keep things clean as possible. Obey the law, please. All right? And here's the deal. The Republicans were embarrassed. They wanted him to quit. Write it down. He didn't quit. They were thinking of like expelling him. Because after all, in Idaho, the rules were such that the governor had to pick somebody of the same party. So a Republican would be replaced by a Republican. The Republicans wouldn't lose out. But he decided he didn't want to quit. So they're like, oh my gosh, what do we do? And they were kind of stuck because did they kick out a guy who did something more serious, as in a felony? No. So can they kick him out, who did a misdemeanor? No, they just had to sort of like lump it. Okay? Yes?
Is prostitution actually illegal?
Yeah, it's illegal in most states. Some states it's legal in many areas, like Nevada. They have it legalized and it is like regulated and so forth in order to like reduce the number of STDs and so forth and so on. So Nevada, if you look at the history of Nevada and its laws, they tend to be a little bit more allowing for stuff. I mean, they were one of the very first states that allowed for gambling. Right? I mean, gambling goes all over the place now, but they were one of the very first states that allowed for gambling. It's really easy to get a marriage in Nevada. Once upon a time, it was much harder in some states. It's really easy to get a divorce in Nevada. And they allow for prostitution. Okay? So anyway, this was a situation, I think, did we get into the details last time? Was this the class we did? Okay, because the other class, so we don't know. So here's the deal, right? Here's the deal. When you're in a public restroom, there's certain things that are supposed to take place in a public restroom, and there's certain things that are not supposed to take place in a public restroom. You can talk. You can do your business. If you're in a guy's, actually the culture in a guy's room is very, girls don't know this. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I remember this one video. It was hilarious. It was like, guys have always been practicing social distancing in restrooms. Am I right? Always. I mean, if there's 5, like guy urinals and so forth and so on, and somebody is like on the one on the far left, where do you go?
Far right.
Exactly, you go on the far right. So you go on the one on the far right. Okay, so the one on the far left is now taken. The one on the far right is that, and then there's 3 in between. So where do you take? Where's the next guy go?
The middle one.
Exactly, you go in the middle one. Okay, so the one on the far left, the one on the far right, and the one in the middle is taken. Next guy comes in. Where does he use?
Anyone for
I don't know. It depends. Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, it's like if it's after a movie theater and you got like massive crowds and so forth. You're like, so you might go to the one next to the. I mean, is that an issue like in female bathrooms and so forth? No, they're like, oh, let's talk and this and that and everything and so forth. Do guys engage in big conversations in the bathrooms? No, that is culturally lax. So when like they did social distancing and so forth with COVID in the guys' bathrooms, they're like, we're already doing this stuff. I mean, it's like, so when you're in a stall, do you reach your hands underneath? No. Do you tap the foot of the person in the neighboring stall? No. But apparently there was sort of like this culture of communication that if you wanted to have an anonymous hookup in this restroom, and that restroom got a reputation of having that, which is why the Minneapolis police conducted a stakeout. And they literally had a police officer there. I don't know if it was like the rookie police officer, like, here's your assignment today, dude. He was handing out citations, arresting people, like throughout that day. And basically the word got out that you don't want to like hook up anymore in that restroom, in the that public restroom in the airport, because that's not for what its purpose. And again, we come back to it. It's like if you're a mom, and you got like a 5-year-old. Are you going to send the 5-year-old boy into the guy's restroom unaccompanied? Right? I mean, I'm curious as to what's the oldest age. This would be really embarrassing, so you don't have to answer. What's the oldest age, guys, that you were still accompanied into the women's room because your mom was not willing to let you guys go off on your own in the guy's public restroom? 9. There you go. Yeah, you're like.
I looked like I was 5 when I was 9.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like you're like, oh my God, I'll just wait. Yes. No. But, okay, so are you guys clear on this one? Senator Craig did not want Idahoans to know about it. Did they know about it? Yes. And then ultimately, he said, I made a mistake. I should not have pled guilty. I want my trial. But here's the deal. When you plead guilty, I mean, it pretty much is too late because the judge is going, do you knowingly plead guilty? Do you know you're waiving this right? You know you're waiving a right to a trial. You know you're waiving a right to da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, yes, let's just get this thing over with, and so forth. And later, he basically said, I should have pled not guilty because those things that the officer is accusing me of doing were all inadvertent, right? There was no intention of him to institute a relationship in the restroom in Minneapolis. In any event, yeah, so go ahead.
2 things. First of all, if you're going to be like, I pled guilty, but I didn't mean it, you always have to say to someone before you do.
I mean,
That's the first thing.
yeah, I mean, when you plead guilty, you're basically admitting the truth of the facts that are charged against you. Yeah.
And the second thing, like, how can you get in trouble? Because, like, if they're agreeing to it, like, they're agreeing to it.
I mean, his punishment in the courts in Minnesota, he didn't do any jail time. I think he had to pay like a fine or something. But it's on his record.
He did nothing wrong.
No, here's what he pled guilty to. Okay? Soliciting to have intimate relations with another person in a public restroom, which is against the law. That's what he pled guilty to. No, it's not prostitution, but I mean, because there was no money exchange, but you're not supposed to, it's like, you're not supposed to do that in a public restroom. A different room, yeah, like a private room. Oh my gosh. So do you understand that? So if you go into a public restroom and somebody's doing something and you're like, that's not what's supposed to go on here, they might be violating the law of your state. In fact, they probably are. Okay?
With your consent from each other.
It's not, that's not the issue. That's the whole thing. It's like, get your own room, not the public restroom. Do you understand?
Can you get your own room
No!
is another room. So
That's a public, oh my God.
but it's another room inside the gallery.
We're moving on. Okay, no more stalling. Just kidding. Boom. Shh. All right, Section 6. You ready? Write this down. Article 1, Section 6. Okay, this stuff is not nearly as titillating or perhaps annoying, depending on how you look at the last particular thing we covered. Organizational, Section 6. Compensation and privileges. Okay, here's the first one. Ready? Write this down. Shh. First bullet point. Paid by U.S. Treasury. This is pretty straightforward. Write this down. If you're in the House or in the Senate, your pay, your salary, comes from the United States Treasury. Right? You're paid by the taxpayers, in a sense. Does that make sense? You're like, isn't that obvious? Let's just make sure we understand this very clear. The deal is we don't want members of Congress to get all this additional pay from people who are like, oh, wow, you're not paid enough. Here's a whole bunch of money, my friend. Do you understand where I'm getting at? You're not supposed to receive all kinds of financial benefits from other people because maybe those other people want you to be more than just a friend. Maybe they want you to help them get certain things through Congress. You guys follow this? I mean, it's almost like, you're like, well, I didn't accept a bribe from that person, but I did accept $100,000 because we're friends. No. You're supposed to be paid from the U.S. Treasury. Do you got that? Hang on just a second because I want to go through a couple other things and I'll take your question. Hold on just a sec. All right? Now, some people say, well, who writes the rules on what is pay and what is okay? Can people give gifts? Once upon a time, write this down. The rules were fairly lax. They were fairly lenient as far as what people could do. So, for example, there were some members of the House and Senate that were earning, I'm doing quotes, you see the air quotes, earning extra money by giving speeches to different organizations. Wow. I wonder how much you could earn by giving a speech. So you get prominent members of the House and Senate that might get $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 giving a speech to a group of businessmen or some other kind of special group. Does that look a little wonky? Does that look like they're getting a special kind of a deal there? Well, people were complaining about that and saying, you can't do that. So they put enough pressure on the members of Congress to say, look, no special extra speaking fees. Because some members of Congress were making a lot of money each year with speaking fees. You know what I'm saying? So people are like, no more of that. Well, then the members of Congress are like, well, I'm used to having a certain amount of money available, and I only get so much in salary. I mean, now the salary, I'm going to say about $150,000-ish for a salary, although some people, there's some people in Congress that's a drop in the amount of money that they could have been earning in whatever field they were doing. Okay? So they dropped it. Okay? So they were dropping that amount of money they were actually earning. So instead, what do? They increased their pay. Write that down. This was be about almost 30 years ago. They increased their pay. Right? So they're not getting speaking fees from other people, which looks kind of funky, but then they went ahead and just voted themselves a big pay increase. Well, some in the public are like, dude, you shouldn't be giving yourself a pay increase, but what can we do about it? Well, you know what they did? Ready? Turn to the very back of your packet. The very, very, very back of your packet. Look at the very bottom there. 27th Amendment. This will be a reminder to you as to how many amendments there are to the Constitution. How many amendments to the Constitution are there? There's 27. That was the last amendment to the Constitution. Look at the date there. 1992.
Wow.
And it says, restraint on congressional salaries. Oh, what does that mean? The Constitution was amended so that it's not that much of a restraint. If they give themselves a pay increase, write it down. here's the 27th Amendment. We're doing it out of turn because it's relevant here. If they give themselves a pay increase, when can they start receiving that pay increase? Nope, not until after the next election. So when's that going to be? I don't know. Like if it was right now, if they gave themselves a pay increase right now, when would they be able to receive that pay increase? 2 years' time. Yeah, after the next election in 2022. Do you see that? So is it a really big deal? Is the 27th Amendment like a really, really big, big deal? No. No, not really. Okay? Yeah.
So is it basically like being college athletes?
What?
Like you can't get paid from other people?
Sure. Although it's more important, because college athletes perform in athletics. Members of Congress makes very important laws. I mean, they've got a lot of political power. But yeah, I mean, as far as like you can't get money from the outside. That's a very important thing. Although, here's the deal. If somebody's still, they're like, I want to be friends with this member of Congress. What can I do? Oh, I can contribute to their campaign so they can fly back. Some of the members of Congress, I mean, they like to actually get rides on private jets. Would you like to have a ride on a private jet, or would you like to go coach in a regular, you want to go coach in a regular plane? How many of you guys, raise your hand, would like to go on a private jet that will take you directly through and you don't have to go through all the airport security? How many of you guys want to get scrunched in with everybody else, coach, including some crying, screaming baby, and so forth and so forth? You would like that. Okay, lovely. So can members of Congress accept the private jet flights from like wealthy people and businesses and so forth? Yes, but they have to declare that as a contribution to their campaign. Woo, okay. Oh, well then you have to, yeah. So you'd have to pay for first class. Okay, quick question, and then we're going to move on. I'm sorry?
Is the Treasury where money is printed?
That's one of the things, that's one of the responsibilities of the Treasury. Okay? All right, next. This next one is kind of wonky. It's called privilege from arrest. I'm going to have to give you some historical background. You ready? Write this down. This is the second bullet point in Article 1, Section 6. You writing that down? Second bullet point, privilege from arrest during session. And this was put in the Constitution because they're like, oh, we're members of Congress. Oh, somebody might be up to something. We don't want that to happen. What are they talking about? They're afraid, they wanted to make sure that, like, the president would never, like, try to have them arrested because the president disagreed with them. Like, when has that ever happened in U.S. history? It hasn't, because they can't be arrested while they're in session. Well, it happened in British history. Okay? It happened in British history. There was a time when, some of you guys might remember this from last year, there was a time when Charles I, this is in the 1600s, and Charles I is doing this thing, and the members of Parliament, their legislature, they're doing some other things, and then Charles I is like, that's it, and he sends some people over there to arrest all those guys. And they got wind of it. They're like, oh my gosh, the king is sending his men over to arrest us all. And they escaped. Right? They escaped. They were not arrested. And eventually you had the English Civil War, and that was like, anybody remember who won the English Civil War between the members of Parliament and the king's forces? I'll tell you what, the king lost and his head was detached from his body. And then they had Oliver Cromwell. You guys may or may not remember Oliver Cromwell. He was like not the king. He was like the head of the Parliament. He was the one that canceled Christmas for a while because he was a Puritan. He was like, oh, this is all kind of crazy and so forth. But then eventually, after he died, they brought back the king. And they wanted to make sure that no future king would ever try to arrest them. They still have it in their ceremony. Do you see the image right here? This man dressed in an outfit that looks like it really, literally was hanging up since, I don't know, the 17th century. He's got this rod, and he literally, his title is the Black Rod. He works for the Queen. He is banging on the door of the House of Commons. This is a ceremony now. It's actually something they do every year. Every year, the House of Commons, which has the real power in England and Britain, and their prime minister, they have a speech given to describe what are the important things that they want that year. So they write the speech. Guess who gets to read the speech? The Queen. So the Queen is over in the House of Lords, or they refer to it as the House of Peers. The Queen's sitting there ready to read the speech. And so she sends her black rod over to the House of Commons to get those guys. To arrest them? No, not to arrest them. I mean, their leader actually wrote the speech that she's about to read. So it's all ceremonial. It's just weird to watch. It's ceremonial. He comes up, and just as he's about to enter the House of Commons to invite them to come over to the House of Lords to sit down and listen to the speech that their guy wrote, they slam the door in his face. It is weird. And sometimes they got this little door thing and so forth. The version that I have here, I think they kind of skipped the part. But I mean, really what's supposed to happen next is someone from the House of Commons talks to this guy through the little window. And they're like, "Are you here to arrest us all?" And then the guy goes, "No." And then they open up the door. And then he comes in and he invites them to go walk across the hall to the House of Lords. Yeah, it's an annual thing. It's like something that they do in Britain. It's really kind of weird. But it goes all the way back to the 1600s when was there a king who tried to arrest all the members of Congress? Or, excuse me, the Parliament. Yes. And so they put that in the United States Constitution. The president cannot arrest the members of the Congress. I'll play the little video for you, and then we'll talk about what this really means in the United States. Okay, what? No. So here we go. Here he is. He's walking past all these members of Parliament. I mean, everyone knows he's coming. This is all part of the ceremony. Some of them find it kind of amusing. All right, there's the door to the Parliament, or to the House of Commons. Boom! They slam it. They should talk to him through the little window thing, but I guess they've skipped that part. Oh, here we go. The King's man, the black rod, is coming into the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, Her Majesty the Queen commands this honourable House attends Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
Don't worry, you're not going to get arrested. So here they go. They all walk over to the other side. There's the Prime Minister. He wrote the speech. The Queen is about to give the speech. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, this really isn't that exciting. So there they go. So now they get into the House of Lords. They bow their head to the Queen. I don't know. I don't think this video's got the Queen. Anyway, they're bowing their heads, so on the other side, they are looking at the Queen. Is that exciting?
No.
Wow. Actually, here's the deal. Because I want to tell you how this actually plays out in this country. Because sometimes you put stuff in the Constitution, and you're like, well, what does this really mean? What does it really mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. Well, it kind of means what you think it might mean. If Congress is in session, can a member of Congress be arrested? Well, it looks like in the Constitution it says, I need a member of Congress. Okay, you're a member of Congress, right? Which, House or Senate?
I guess you.
Yeah, pick one.
House.
How? Okay, so you're in the House, all right? So you're in session and so forth. What kinds of potential things could you be arrested for? Well, violating crimes and so forth. And maybe driving. This is where it came up. In South Dakota, Representative Bill Janklow, South Dakota Representative, would he would get pulled over for speeding. And then he would tell the officer, I mean, it's almost like he whipped out his little, I'm a member of Congress, you can't touch me, I got the Constitution, I'm privileged from arrest. You can write that down. So over a number of years, he got a bit of a reputation of basically saying, I'm not going to take your ticket. You can't arrest me or give me a ticket for speeding or whatever because I'm a member of Congress, and Congress is still in session, and I'm doing my business here in South Dakota. So, I don't know. Would you, if you were caught speeding as a representative, would you take the ticket, or would you go, I'm going to flash my little Constitution card here and get out of it?
I'd flash the card.
Would you?
Yeah.
Let's say you're all voters in his district. Raise your hand if you're like, I feel better because this representative has gone ahead and flashed his little like, you can't arrest me. Raise your hand if you don't like him as much because he's got some special thing that you don't. You have to be careful. Oh, failure. Anyway, so, but he did. Write that down. I mean, Bill Janklow would be like, flashing the card, just like Trey was saying. I'm flashed the card. I'm flashed the card. So did he ever get the message that what he was doing in speeding like on the roads of South Dakota was wrong? No, you know what happened one day? Yeah, the motorcycle. Hit the motorcycle. The guy was dead. The representative hit the guy on the motorcycle. Yeah. Sometimes speeding, sometimes excessive. I mean, this is like, some of his situations are like massively excessive speeding. We're not talking about 5 or 10 miles over. We're talking about like 20, 30, or 40 miles over. And then, yeah, the guy on the motorcycle ended up dead. Oh, by the way, eventually then, because the voters, previously they knew that he liked to speed, but they kept voting for him. After this, no. People will be like, oh, am I going to vote for the guy that like killed some guy because he was, no. I think the facts of that particular case, you can look it up, show that he bore the responsibility in that particular situation. Oh, I'm going 100 miles an hour, and it's like, oh, I just bumped him, you know. And that's the dangerous thing about motorcycles. I mean, you can go really fast and everything. It's real cool, the wind blowing through your hair, but there's not a lot of room for mistakes and error in motorcycles. You don't get an airbag in a motorcycle. Yeah.
So it's basically saying that if you're serving a term in Congress, you can't get arrested?
It can be interpreted that way, but make sure you put this down. There's some real practical implications here. Because some people say, look, they put it in there so that the president doesn't just go over and arrest all the members of Congress because he doesn't like them. I mean, could you ever think of a time when the president didn't like what Congress was going to do? And oh, okay, never mind. Like wanted to mess with those guys? Oh, yeah, anyway. But yeah, so privilege from arrest. The president's got a lot of people working for him. And yeah, no, I mean, this didn't happen last week. President Trump did not send a whole bunch of people up there to arrest the members of Congress. Okay, he encouraged people to go up there and speak their mind. I don't know, take your pick. Okay? So somebody would say, this little part of the Constitution doesn't really fit your, oh, I can get away with anything as a member of Congress. Because what's really going to act as a restraint on members of Congress saying you can't arrest me for anything? The voters. And eventually, if the voters see that you're trying to like get some special privilege that you don't really deserve, they're not going to be very happy. And what do unhappy voters do to somebody who's trying to get their votes again? They don't vote for them in the next time around. Okay? All right, next one. We don't have a slide on this one because this one's actually fairly straightforward. You see the third bullet point on section 6, ban on other offices? It basically means this. If you're in the Senate, you're in the Senate. If you're in the House, you're in the House. You can't be like in the Senate and be a governor back in your home state. You're like, oh, I thought that was obvious. Like they're both full-time jobs. But in some countries, sometimes you get overlaps. You get like somebody who holds one job here and then they hold another job here and so forth. They made it real clear in the Constitution. Write this down. If you're in the House, that's your job.
What?
If you're in the House of Representatives, that's your job. Representative in the House of Representatives.
Oh.
Can you be the governor back in your home state at the same time? No. Can you be the mayor of like your home city? No. Yeah. No. I mean that's an interesting question. No. I mean you really don't. And actually here's the deal. Like President Trump, okay, because as an analogy, President Trump, what's his job? President. Does he have other financial interests? Heck yeah, he's got like all kinds of properties all over the world and so forth. Can he manage those properties at the same time that he's president? No. No, you don't have to necessarily give them up, but you have to give over management and control of those properties to somebody else. I think one of his sons takes care of it, yeah, during that time period. Anyway, we'll get to the next one, Section 7, and how a bill becomes a law next time, and we'll get into I'm just a bill. Yeah, We'll do that next time. Y'all good? Okay, wipe her down. And, yep. Be good.